Hello friends, in this tutorial you will learn how to call an external API with Next.js and also how to implement search filter and infinite scroll pagination. So let's take a quick look to the assignment. The first task is connect GitHub API and display all public repositories. The second task is to load commits after clicking a single repository, and we'll have search functionality to search for commits by terms. And for this tutorial, we are going to use a REST API, and for this bonus, we will have a server-side rendering, and we will use Tailwind CSS as well, and the infinite scroll for commit pages, as I mentioned before. For the last one, we will have the dark and light theme instead of this order functionality, and at the end, we will build the project and deploy it to the reversal. Let's jump to the code and let's create a folder in the desktop that will hold our application, and I will call it Next-Git-App. Open the project with your terminal, and to start a Next.js application, let's open Next.js website, and from there, let's copy this command and paste it in your terminal with the dot in the end, so we initialize the project in same directory, and answer a question provided yes for TypeScript, ESLint, Tailwind, and app router. Import aliases, then wait until all dependencies are installed successfully. Now we are done with the first step, and the second one is to add ShadCN UI library to our project. And to do that, let's visit ShadCN UI website, and from there click started, go to installation, then select Next.js and copy this command with npm npx ShadCN UI ShadCN-UI add latest init, and pass it in your terminal, and make sure you are in the right directory. Select default style and search for base color, yes for CSS variables. Once the installation is finished, open the project with your preferred editor. For me, I'm using Visual Studio Code. So let's run this project to make sure it's working correctly. Let's visit localhost 3000. Yeah, and it's working as expected. So inside the app folder, let's go to the page.tsx, which is the main entry of our application, and delete all data inside main tag. And we do not need this high screen class. Now we have an empty page, and here we will render all public repositories. The second step here is setting up themes for our application so we can switch between light and dark mode. So go back to the ShadCN UI website and search for dark mode, then select Next.js and just copy this command npm install next-themes and pass it in your editor terminal. Once the installation is finished, go back again to ShadCN website. So let's copy this part. So let's create a file called themes-provider.tsx inside our component folder and pass the code here. So after installing the Next themes and creating theme provider component, the next step here is to wrap our route layout with this theme provider. So let's copy this part from ShadCN UI theme provider component and just replace with what we have in our application. And let's import the theme provider component from our components. The last step here is to add a mode toggle from ShadCN UI, and just copy the entire code inside here, and inside component folder let's create new file, and I will call it toggle-mod.tsx and pass the code here. Now we need to install those components from ShadCN UI in your terminal. Now go back to ShadCN UI and get the button component. Just copy and let's run it in our VS Code terminal. The red lines now are gone, and the same thing with drop down menu. Component inside toggle mode component. Let's delete this line for system mode because we won't have only the ability to switch between light and dark mode for this tutorial. Now let's create a main navbar for our application by creating new component file inside components, and I will call it navbar.tsx. And we'll rename it navbar. Inside the return function, we won't have a nav tag with these classes, flex, items, center, and justify between with fall, and in the LG max width will be 5XL. Inside this nav element, we won't have a div. Inside this div, we won't have an image. And this image comes from Next.js/image. And I won't give it some props. An empty source for now with 100 and high of 20, the alt of app logo, and class name of dark invert. Outside this div, but still inside nav tag, let's add a div inside this div and put the toggle model component that we have import from our inside component directory. For the logo, let's visit logo epsom and get a dummy SVG logo. Just let's download this one. Just drag it inside public folder and rename it to logo.svg. And in this RC, let's put the link of /logo.svg and save. Now we want to render a navbar component inside the main tag in the root page.tsx, and do not forget to import it from component directory, just like so. And save. Refresh the browser, and now we have basic navbar with fall themes functionality, and we can switch between dark and light mode, but we won't have the black and white logo instead of this color. So let's change the red hex color to the black in the SVG code, and they will do that quickly. Now we are done with navbar, and next step is to define some types for data that you can get from GitHub API. Because we are using TypeScript and we want to take the advantage of type safety. And here I asked ChatGPT about repositories and commits type definition that's come from GitHub API, and got these types like so, and there are a lot of them with fields and other subfields, but based on our needs and this application, I select only fields we need, and here is the final result for our types we will use. So inside the lib folder, let's create types.ts file, and let me pass just all types that I have already mentioned before for repository, commit, and owner. And to call the GitHub REST API, we have to create a new file inside this lib, and I will call it getData.ts. Inside here, we want to export an async function called getData, and inside it, we want to say response equals to wait fetch, and we will use fetch method, and we pass the link where we can fetch data, which is this link, okay? And we check here if there is no response. And what we want to do is just to throw a new error with message failed to fetch data. And if it's not that the case, we want to return a response as a JSON, so res.json function. In the main component, we want to call this function, but before that, let's have a div with this bunch of classes. In this tutorial, we're going to focus on styling and Tailwind CSS because there's not much component to style, and yeah, that's why I just copy and paste classes if there are a lot of them. Just guys, don't waste your time, but let me know in the comment if you want make for you a tutorial or mini-series tutorial about Tailwind CSS or CSS terrain in general, including CSS Flexbox and CSS Grid, which are the main foundation you have to learn before go to learn Tailwind CSS. Okay, so let's import getData function from the lib folder, and first let's call it inside component, and we want to save the response inside data, so data object, so we can type const data equal to wait getData function, and make sure that your top function is an asynchronous function, and that's okay because this is a server component. We can map over data object by typing data.map, and we pass a repo of type repository that we have already in our type definition, and you can import it from there. And inside we would have a div with key, word, and let's give it repo.id and some classes. And again, I just copy and paste these classes here. Inside this div, let's create another div with classes flex, justify between, and item center, and margin bottom 4. Inside this div, we would have a next image, and we can import the image from next/image. For the source, put repo.owner.avatar_URL. The alt, let's say just avatar. The width, let's give it 40, and high 40, and priority. For class name, let's give it a bg-salt-500 and a rounded fall. And now if you refresh your app, you will get an error says host name not configured under image on your next.config.js. And to fix that, let's open next config file that we have in the root of our project, and let's add this snippet from Next.js docs and pass the domain that image are coming from front of the hostname inside the image object, just like so. And just restart your application to make sure it's work, and I think we are good to go. Now we have already the avatars of all public repositories, owners, and let's display other needed data. So under the image, we want to display a repo owner, put an h2 with class text -md and font semi-bold, and let's render inside this an h2, and inside we have a repo. We want to have the repo.owner.login. Outside this div, let's create another div, and we want to have two paragraphs inside it and get it some classes, flex and flex call, justify start, text starts, and in the first paragraph we want to display the repo name, and in the second one we want to render the repo.description. For the repo name, we want class add classes py-1, and for the repo description we want to have class of m0, which is margin 0, and max width of 30 ch, which means character high, and text of sm, and opacity of -50. under the div that wrap these two paragraphs, we won't have another one. Inside it, we need a link, and we can import link from next link. And for the href, we won't pass a dynamic path. So open curly braces and literal template, then a dollar symbol and another curly braces, and just put repo.id. Inside the link, we need a button that's come from ShadCN UI components, and let's give it a class of capitalized and variant of outline. For the text, let's say view commits. So every time user click this button, we'll take them to the singular repo page that we don't have yet. Inside this app directory, let's create a dynamic route using the ID by creating a new folder and open square bracket and put ID inside like this. And inside this folder, we want to create page.tsx. In this page, we will render all commits belongs to a specific repository. But before that, we need an endpoint to call to fetch commits, because all what we have for now is an endpoint to call the repositories. And to do that, and to have that, we have to go back to get data inside lib folder. And first, let's import commit types from our types like so. And now let's create a new sync function, and we call it fetch commit, and it's return a premise of type commit array. Okay, so this promise is of type an array of commit. Inside, let's put a try catch block, and let's handle the error first by throwing new error. So let's write console.error, and let's say for the message error fetching commits, and we pass the error itself, and in the bottom we want to throw this error. But so to fetch commits, we need first to fetch a single repository by its ID. So we have to pass a repo ID as argument to our function fetch commits of type string, just like so. And now let's fetch repository data const response repo equal to wait method, and fetch, then open bracket and use template literal because we wanted to add a dynamic argument to this link. Let's add slash and $, then the repo ID. And we want to save the response in a constant called repo data. So let's say const repo data is equals to await, and let's pass the response repo.json. Okay. Now we can fetch commit for the repository by typing const response commit equals to await, and we use again the fetch method and pass the same link here, https://api.github.com/repos/ and here was $, because we want to pass a dynamic parameter which is a repo data.phonenames, and again slash commits. Here under this function we want to create a const called commits equals to await response commits.json, and then after that we want to return commits. These commits may be a lot of data, so to avoid freezing our application when we fetch commits, we want to add a GitHub pagination arguments called per page. Just post exclamation mark per underscore page, and it's put 20. So we can now safely fetch only the first 20 commits for every single repository. Okay. So let's go to the page inside the dynamic route, inside our dynamic route segment, we will have the ID, and we need to access the URL to get the repo ID from there, and we can display commits for that repo specifically. Okay, and we can access the route segment through the params prop and URL search params from search params prop for given page. If you are using client component, you can use path name or use selected layout segment for more complex routes. But for our case here, we need only use params and search params. So we will use params to get the ID and search params to get the term where user write in the input, and we'll explain that later. So let's create some type props for our page and want to export that. So export type page props equal, and what we need here is first is the params as I mentioned before, which is and open curly braces ID of type string or be undefined. The second one is search params, which will be optional, and here we'll open again the curly braces and square bracket key type string, otherwise it will be a string or an array of string or undefined. Okay, and as we mentioned before, the search params will be optional, so we put the exclamation mark there. So let's pass these props of type page props to our component. So inside here, props of type page props. Inside here, we won't have a repo ID constant that will be of type string or undefined equals to props and put the exclamation mark dot params dot ID. Want for now to have a simple check if there is no repo and there is no repo ID, and we won't throw an error. So let's put if open parentheses exclamation mark a repo ID, and that means if there is no repo ID. So what we want to do is to console an error, and let's say repo ID is undefined, and throw the new error and the message will repository not found. Okay, and if it's not that the case, we won't call our fetch commit function inside try catch block. So let's put try catch block, and let's handle the error first, and this just console the error and with message error fetching commits, and we pass the error. Okay, so that's for error case. And what we want here, we want to save these commits in a commit. So say commits await fetch commits, and we pass the repo ID as argument for our function, and the repo ID is coming from params that we have saved in the repo ID constant above. So, but we need to define the commit as an array of commits, just like so. Let commits, and will be of type an array of commits or general array. And we have import also the fetch commits function from get data inside lib. So let's return a div here, and this div with class flex call and item center. Inside this div, we want to put another one with classes flex PE6 justify between and weight of 80%, and another div with the class margin -4, and inside let's have a link with href to homepage. So inside here we have to put a button with class name capitalized and variant of outline, and let's say just back. So when a user click this button, it will go back to the homepage. Okay, outside the second div, but still inside the main one, let's create new div and give it some classes of empty 60 and flex call max width of 80 as well. Inside, we want to loop over commits and display them in card. So let's import card from ShadCN UI, and actually we need to import card. So let's say import card, card header, card title, and card description, and all come from at component/UI/card. So let's say commits.map, and let's pass a commit of type commit with capital C that we have already in our types, and index of type number. And as I mentioned before, we want to return a commit inside a card. So let's pass here a card with class name, flex, and mb-4. And we want to give this card a dynamic key. So key curly braces, and let's open a template literal $sign and curly braces again, commit.sha, and here we'll put minus the $sign and pass here again the index. This SHA is from GitHub API, and it's kind of specific number for tracking the commit changes. I guess I'm not sure about that, but it's a unique key, so we can use it safely as a key here. Inside this card, we want to have here card header, and inside the card header, we need card title with class of text -xl, and inside this title, we want render commit.author.name. Under the card title, we want to have the card description, and inside this description, we have to render commit.commit.message. I've just checked the console and I see this hydration error. And to solve this problem, let's go back to the toggle component and inside UI folder, and let's put this code. Now the next task is to implement infinite scroll pagination. And to do that, let's create a new component and we'll call infinite scroll.tsx, and make sure you put this client directive on the top. Then let's import all components we need. We need to import the use effect, use state from React, and fetch commits function from lib/API. And also let's import the card and card description, card header, and card title from component UI/card. And we need also to import the commit from @/lib/types. And in this client page, we have a small indicator show to the user that other commits or next page commits are allowed in. And to have that, we will use something called React Spinners. So let's install this library. It's a small library, and let's do that. npm install -save React Spinners. Okay, now let's import from this React Spinners. What we want to import is something called clip loader. Okay, great. Now let's create an interface for infinite scroll props like so. So the export interface infinite scroll commit props, and all what we need for now is the repo ID of type string or undefined. The initial page will be type number, and the initial commits will be type of array of commit. Okay, and let's pass this type to a component like so, and we'll be actually type react.fc, which means function component, and will be of type infinite scroll commits props. Inside this, and inside here, we want to structure this type, so we pass the repo ID and the initial page for now. Then we need to have some states here for the commits and page and loading state, just like so. So let's say const, open square bracket, commit, say commits, and let's use state, this of type commits array, and this here pass as an empty array. For the second one is const page, and we'll set page equals to state of type number, and here we pass the initial page. The last one is the loading state, const square bracket loading, and set loading and use state as well, and will be of type boolean, and by default let's pass false as a value. Then we want to use effect hooks from React. Inside this use effect hook, let's create a function to load another 20 commits for next page every time the user is scrolled down. And it will be a sync function, so let's say const load more commits equal to sync function. So first we want to check if there is a repo ID. So if repo ID and open curly braces, first thing we want to do is to set loading to true. So we set loading state to true instead of false. And before fetch commits for next page, we won't have a delay of 200 milliseconds. So to avoid the high rate limit API, so let's type await new promise, or pass the resolve. We'll say set timeout and pass the resolve and the time value, which is 200 milliseconds. Okay, now we can fetch commits for next page. So const next page commits equal to await fetch commits, and let's pass a repo ID and page plus 1. So the initial page plus next page. Then we need to update our commits. So let's set commits, prevent commits, and here I want to spread all prevent commits and as well next page commits. Then we have to update the page also, so set page to prevent page, and here we want to say prevent page plus 1. And set loading to false again. Now we want to handle the scroll event, so when users scroll down, we will load more commits, and we have to create the function that check if the user has scrolled to the bottom of the page. So let's say const handle scroll, and there will be a function, and we say if window dot inner height plus document element dot scroll top triple equals document element dot offset height, and here we will say load more commit function. Then we want to add the scroll event listener, so when the component is mounted. So let's say window add event listener, and let's pass scroll and handle scroll function. And need also to remove the scroll event listener when the component unmounts, and this prevent memory leaks and ensure that the event listener is not attached multiple times. So let's return function, and inside this function let's say window.remove event listener, and same thing we pass the scroll and handle scroll. Okay, last thing we have to add is a dependency array to our use effects. So we had the page and repo ID. The use effect hooks runs after initial render, and whenever the page or repo ID state variables changes, this ensures that the event listener is set up with the latest values of page and the repo ID. What we want to return here is a React fragment, and inside this, we want to have a div with class empty 60 and flex call and max width of 80. And here we want to have a conditional rendering of commits. So we want to check if the commits array has items or no. So if that have items, we want to render them. Even it's not the case, we want to do something else. And let's say commits.length greater than 0, question mark and open parenthesis and colon and another parenthesis here. So inside first parenthesis, let's pass for now an empty div. And in the second one, we'll check if there is no loading, we won't have an empty string. And if there is a loading, we want to have a div with flex and justify center, margin top of 4. And inside this div, we have to pass the clip loader, and let's give it this color and loading to stay to true and the size of 35. Okay, now let's go back to the first case that if we have commits items inside the arrays. So what we want to do is just display them. So as I mentioned before, if the commits contains item, we want to map over this array and render each commit inside a card component. So inside this empty div for now, let's put card with class name, flex, and margin bottom of 4. And for the case, let's say curly braces, $, and open another curly braces, and set the commit.sha -$ and the index. Okay, we want to have a header, card header. Inside card header, we want to have card title. Inside card title, we want to render commit.author.name, and let's give it a class of text XL. And we want also card description, and we want to render inside it commit.commit.message. Okay, now let's open a single repo page and add the infinite scroll component here in the bottom, just like so. And let's import it and click to import. And let's give some props that needed. The repo ID will be of type repo ID question mark string, so repo ID colon undefined. The initial page will be 1 and the initial commit will be of type commit. Save and let's check if it works. And well, congratulations, you have just implemented infinite scroll pagination, and you can see the little spinner here in the bottom will fetch more new commits. And the last feature which we have in our application is filter commits. So we can search for specific commits based on what user is put in search input. Okay, so to do that, let's create a new component and let's call it search commits.t6. And we want to rename the constant to search with capitals. Add user client directive. So this component will be client component because we will need to use some React hooks. And let's import all what we need for now is the use effect and the use ref and the use state, and they are all from React. And we need also the use router, and this will be from Next/navigation, and the input from component UI input. And the next step is to define an interface search props for our component. So interface search props and open curly braces. And the props we need is the search, which will be optional and of type string. And the repo ID will be also optional and of type string. So let's pass these props to the component, search, and repo ID, and will be of type search props. Inside the component, let's add the const router equal to user router, and const initial render, use ref and it's pass true for now, and we won't have const, we'll call it text and set text. We use state and an empty string for now. And we need to use the hook effect again. So use effect and open curly braces. And for this use effect, let's keep it empty for now and add the text as a dependency. And in the bottom here, what we want to return is a div. And inside the div, we'll have an input and the value will be text and placeholder, let's say search commits ... and on change, say an event and set text and event.target.value. So on change allow us to track the user input data. The type, of course, will be of type text and class name, let's give it with full. Now let's go back to the page component and let's add a div. And inside this div, we want a render search component like so. And we want to give the div a class of with full. Now refresh the page and now we can see the search input here at the top. Go back to the search and component and inside use effect, we want to print text value. So console.log and inside we pass the text. And if we check the console and put something in the input now, and now we can see in the console anything right here inside the input. Now we have the access to what user try to search for inside commits, and we need a way to send this search to the server where fetching the commits. And we can filter commits that contains what user write in the search input, and to achieve that we will use search params that I mentioned before. So we can read the term from the URL before passing it to fetch commits function as an optional argument. So instead of printing in the console what user write inside the input, let's delete that. And what we want to do first is to use a ref hook so we can track the initial render to prevent unnecessary effect. So if initial render.current and open a curly braces, we want to add here initial render.current equals to false and return. And the second thing we want to check is if there is no search query, so we want to check if the repo ID is available. So if exclamation mark, text, curly braces, and we want to check here if repo ID, if that case we have the repo ID, we want say router.push and open parenthesis inside literal template /$ curly braces repo ID. And we can add here an else way, so if there is a search query, we won't include it into the route. We won't say router.push and open parenthesis template literal because we won't pass here again a dynamic argument or dynamic value. So the repo ID / question mark and search equals to $, and here we have the text. And we want the router and the repo ID as dependencies as well. So this is work just fine, but we can make it more better. So instead of sending a request every time a user type a character, to avoid bombard the server with request, we'll use a light library called useDebounce. So to have a delay until the user finish typing before sending the request. And to add this library, let's go to terminal and just say npm install use-debounce. Okay. So what we won't have here, we won't have a const query equals to useDebounce, and we pass to the useDebounce the text we have here in the constant app and the timing with it, which is 750 milliseconds. That means every time a user type a character, we won't have this delay, so we can not send the request exactly at that time. In the bottom here, instead of checking if there is a text, we will check if there is a query, and if that is the case, instead of the text, we will pass the query here. And for dependencies inside of text, we will put query. Okay. And now it's time to use search params to get the value from the URL and pass it to the fetch commit function. And to do that, let's go back to the page and let's add const search, and this equal of type props, of course, are optional. Search params optional dot search double equal and pass the string. Otherwise will be a props dot search params dot search or undefined. And we need to pass these properties to our search component. So here we have to add search equal curly braces and we pass search. And for the repo ID will be repo ID question mark of type string. And we pass a repo ID colon undefined. That means it can be also undefined. Okay. And go back to get data function and let's add this props as well, which is optional. So it's search and we'll type string. But even if we type something here in the search input, we do not get anything. We do not get any result. And that makes sense because if we take a look to the page component where we are fetching and displaying only irregular commits. So we need to include filter commits also if they are there, or just return all commits. And to do that, we need to refactor our try catch block where we call fetch commit function. So first thing, instead of let commits, we can say let filter commits and will be the same type. And here inside, let's delete all this and say if there is a repo ID, we won't save all commits in a constant. Let's say const commits equal to await fetch commits and we'll pass the repo ID. We want also filter commits based on the search term. So we can say filter commits equals to search, and this filter commits we have already defined it above here, equals to search question mark commits dot filter, and we pass the commit of type commit, and we want here commit dot message, and we want change it to the lowercase, and then we want include, and what we want to include is search, and we'll change it also to the lowercase. At the end, we want to return the commits. Basically, this change allows us to return filter commit based on the search. If they are not, we will return the regular commits that we have already. And the else here, we want to handle in case there is an error such as the repo ID is not defined. So we can console.error and we can say the repo ID is undefined. Okay. And here instead of commits, change the loop to the filter commit, and same thing for search property and save. So let's test our search functionality. Everything works fine, and as expected, we get all commits contains the word that we are searching for. And to test our work, before going to deployment, let's go back to terminal and stop the server. Let's add the build version, npm run build, then npm run start, and the project is still work correctly without any issue, and the system, and this is something amazing. Now let's create a new repository in our GitHub, and I will call it GitHub API Next.js. Let's copy this commands because we have already initialized GitHub in our application. So all what we need is those commands, copy and paste those commands to our terminal. Perfect. Now we have pushed our code to our repository. So go to the Vercel and let's expose this repository. for Vercel, and you can search by term, GitHub API. And select and import. Now you can wait until deployment is finished, and now we can visit our web app. That's all. If you want to support the show in this channel, please like and subscribe, and happy coding. Bye.